My mom talked my boyfriend into marrying my sister, telling him, "She's stronger and a better match for you." I was crushed when I found out, so I left and started a new life on my own. Years later we crossed paths again at a huge party I hosted. But when they saw who my husband was, their faces went pale, because my husband was... Okay, buckle up, because I'm about to tell you a story that still feels like it was ripped straight from a movie script. A story about an unthinkable betrayal that nearly broke me, but ultimately led to a comeback so sweet. The look on their faces when they realized what they'd lost? Absolutely priceless. You know, from the outside, my family in suburban Boston looked picture perfect. We had the colonial house, the white picket fence, the manicured lawn. But behind all that, a different reality was brewing. My mother, Diane, was the silent dictator of our household. She'd smile sweetly at neighbors, then dissect their every flaw the moment they were gone. My dad, Gerald, was her polar opposite, quiet, passive, always nodding along just to keep the peace. And then there was my sister, Amber. 3 years older, she was everything my mom ever wanted. Blonde, beautiful, a social butterfly, homecoming queen, the girl every boy wanted. Me? I was the family's black sheep. While Amber spent hours on her makeup and social status, I was buried in books and computer code. My room was covered in academic awards, not boy band posters. By 14, I was teaching myself programming languages and building websites. None of it impressed my mom. "Computers are for boys, Sophia." She'd wave me off. "You'll never find a husband hiding behind those screens." Every achievement was met with, "That's nice, dear." But did you hear about Amber's new modeling opportunity? Amber's temporary jobs and failed ventures were celebrated, while my consistent academic excellence was just an afterthought. My dad would sometimes sneak into my room, awkwardly pat my shoulder, whispering, "Your mother means well. She just worries about you." But his eyes, they told a different story. He knew the favoritism was wrong, but he just couldn't stand up to her. The summer before my senior year, I won a national coding competition, complete with a college scholarship. I was so excited, so hopeful. I shared the news at dinner, practically bursting. My mom's response? "Well, I suppose that's one way to get to college since you won't be getting any athletic scholarships like Amber did." My dad just stared at his plate. Amber smirked. That night I made myself a promise. That scholarship was my ticket out. I applied only to schools at least 3 states away. When my MIT acceptance arrived, I celebrated in private. My mother's only comment was concern about me moving so far from family. College was my salvation. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who got me. My best friend, Zoe. I met her during orientation when we both reached for the same computer science textbook. Her honesty and humor were a breath of fresh air. Through Zoe, I started to build the confidence my family had systematically dismantled. She couldn't understand why I dreaded going home. "Your family sounds like a bad reality TV show," she'd say. "You know that's not normal, right?" Intellectually, I did. Emotionally, I still craved their approval. But each visit home just highlighted the dysfunction. By junior year, I was limiting trips to major holidays. My growing independence seemed to actively annoy my mom. "MIT is making you cold," she accused, when I pushed back against one of Amber's dramatic stories. "You used to be such a sweet girl." No, the truth was I was finally finding my voice. My dad would watch these exchanges with this mixture of concern, and I swear maybe a flicker of pride. During my senior year's winter break, my mom suggested I dress more like Amber for a party. I calmly replied, "I'm comfortable with how I look, Mom." The shocked expression on her face? Worth the silent treatment that followed. Little did I know this newfound strength would be tested in ways I couldn't imagine when I brought home the first man I truly loved. His name was Jason Carter. I met him at a tech conference during my senior year. He was presenting an app and I was just captivated. He was confident but not arrogant, brilliant but humble. We ended up talking for an hour, then another, moving to a coffee shop. He had these warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Your perspective is exactly what this project needs," he said, and I felt truly seen for the first time. Those meetings turned into coffee dates, then coding sessions, then actual dates. Our relationship deepened. He listened. He valued my opinions. I finally found myself opening up about my family. "They sound challenging," he said carefully, after I described a particularly painful Christmas where my mother had compared my academic scholarship to Amber's beauty pageant win, declaring only one of those would last. "Your intelligence and passion are incredible gifts, Sophia. Anyone who can't see that isn't seeing you clearly." By spring break, we were serious enough that I invited him home to meet my family. Part of me wanted to show off this incredible man who valued me. Another part hoped that seeing me with Jason might finally make my mom recognize my worth. The visit started well. My dad was genuinely interested in Jason's business. My mom was uncharacteristically warm, serving her special Sunday roast, usually reserved for Amber's boyfriends. "You've done well for yourself, Jason," she purred, refilling his wine. "Stanford, Google, your own company, very impressive." I should have seen the gleam in her eye. It wasn't approval of my choice. It was an assessment of an asset. Then Amber arrived. A calculated late entrance, I realize now. She just happened to be in the neighborhood, despite living 40 minutes away. She was between boyfriends and jobs, you see. She swept into the dining room. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, form-fitting dress. "So you're the genius programmer Sophia's been hiding from us," she said with a laugh that made it sound like I was keeping secrets. She kissed everyone, lingering slightly on Jason. Her hand rested on his shoulder. Throughout dinner, Amber inserted herself into every conversation, strategically highlighting connections with Jason. They both enjoyed hiking. She'd gone once for a photo shoot. Sushi, she usually complained about raw fish. Indie films, she usually fell asleep. I watched Jason carefully, relieved to see him politely listen, then return his attention to me or my father. When she asked about his business model, claiming a secret interest in tech that was news to everyone, he gave brief answers before turning to me. "Sophia's actually been helping me refine the algorithm," he said, squeezing my hand under the table. She spotted inefficiencies I'd missed entirely. My mother cleared her throat. "Well, isn't that nice? Amber has quite a head for business too. She nearly majored in marketing." Amber quickly added, "I changed because marketing seemed too limiting. I wanted something broader." What she didn't mention was failing introductory marketing twice. Despite these subtle undercurrents, the weekend ended positively. Jason was genuinely impressed. "Your mom really went all out," he said. "And your sister is certainly energetic." I just laughed nervously. Over the next few weeks, our relationship deepened. One late night on the roof of his apartment, Jason finally brought up our future. "What if you came to work with me after graduation? We could expand the business together. Your skills complement mine perfectly." My heart raced. "And maybe," he squeezed my hand, "maybe we could look for an apartment together too." For the first time, I allowed myself to envision a truly happy future. A life built with someone who valued me for exactly who I was. I kissed him, overwhelmed. "I'll take that as a yes," he whispered. Little did I know, while I was dreaming of our future, forces were already in motion to ensure it would never happen. My final semester at MIT should have been exciting. Instead, it became the period when everything fell apart. The changes were subtle at first. Jason took longer to respond to texts. Our daily calls became every other day, then twice a week. He canceled our Friday night date 3 weeks in a row, citing crucial investor meetings. "I'm sorry, babe," he'd say. "Once this funding is secured, things will calm down." I believed him. I understood the demands of a startup. But something felt off. One evening, scrolling Instagram, I saw a post from a restaurant in my hometown. "Famous chocolate lava cake." Caption mentioned a special visitor from the tech world. In the background, blurred but unmistakable, was Jason's profile. My stomach dropped. He told me he was in New York that weekend. What was he doing 3 hours in the opposite direction? When I confronted him, his explanation came too quickly. "Last-minute change of plans. Investor lives near your parents. I ran into your mom at the grocery store. Pure coincidence." Something in his voice was off, but I couldn't identify what. I told myself I was being paranoid. I threw myself into my project, ignoring the growing unease. 3 weeks later, during spring break, I decided to surprise Jason by driving to his apartment instead of going home. I didn't tell my family either. The thought of Amber's increasingly obvious flirtation with Jason was more than I could handle. When I arrived at his building, his car wasn't there. On a hunch, I drove to his office. Still no car. But his business partner, Ryan, was leaving. "Jason." Ryan looked confused. He took a few days off. Said he was visiting family. Jason's family lived in California. Mine lived in Massachusetts. We were in Cambridge. I drove home in a daze, not entirely sure what I was thinking. 6 hours later, I pulled into my parents' driveway at 11 p.m. My dad's car, my mom's car, and parked behind them Jason's distinctive blue Subaru, with that small dent on the passenger door from our hiking trip. The house was dark except for the living room. I used my key, entering quietly, hearing low voices. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. I stopped at the living room entrance, partially hidden by the hallway wall. Jason sat on our couch. My sister, Amber, was beside him, closer than friends would ever sit. My mother was in her favorite armchair, leaning forward, animated. "You two make so much sense together," she was saying. "Sophia is so absorbed in her computer world. She'll never fully appreciate what you're building, Jason. You need someone who understands the social aspects of business, the connections, the networking. Amber has those skills in abundance." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Sophia has been really distant lately, always working on her project." "That's how she is," Amber chimed in, placing her hand on his knee. "Always choosing computers over people. Remember when she skipped my college graduation to attend that tech conference?" I hadn't. I'd skipped because Amber specifically told me not to come after I refused to write her final term paper. "I just don't know anymore," Jason continued, running a hand through his dark hair. That familiar gesture now twisted into something painful. "You need to think about your future," my mother pressed. "Amber can be the perfect partner for a man with your ambitions. The supportive wife who makes the right connections, hosts the right dinner parties, Can you honestly see Sophia doing that? She'd probably wear jeans to a business function and talk about coding all night. I must have made a sound because suddenly, all three heads snapped in my direction. The look on Jason's face, shock mingled with guilt, told me everything I needed to know. Sophia. My mother recovered first. What a surprise. We thought you were staying at school this week. I ignored her, my gaze locked on Jason. How long has this been going on? He stood up, moving away from Amber. It's not what it looks like, really. Because it looks like you've been coming to my family home behind my back. I cut in, my voice shaking. It looks like you're sitting here with my mother and sister discussing our relationship, and your doubts about me. What part am I misinterpreting? Sweetheart, my mother interjected. We're just having a conversation. Jason has been kind enough to visit your father and me occasionally. Is that so wrong? And me ending up here during those visits is pure coincidence, Amber added, with a smirk that vanished when my mother shot her a warning look. When did these visits start? I asked Jason directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. A couple months ago, he finally mumbled. Your mom called me. Said your dad was having health issues and wanted some company while your mom ran errands. It seemed harmless. My father had no health issues, and he was currently upstairs, either oblivious or deliberately absent. And then, Jason ran a hand through his hair. Then it became regular. Your mom would call, say they missed having young people around. I'd stop by when I was in the area. He didn't deny telling me he was somewhere else. Sophia. My mother stood, approaching me like I was a wounded animal that might lash out. You're overreacting. Jason has been confused about your relationship. That's natural when young people are planning their futures. I simply pointed out that perhaps you two want different things and suggested my sister as a convenient replacement. I finished for her. Don't be crude, my mother snapped, her gentle facade cracking. I merely observed that Amber might be more aligned with the type of life Jason is building. You've made it abundantly clear that your computers come first. What successful man wants to be second place in his wife's life? Jason and I had discussed moving in, but marriage had been only an implied someday. I turned to Jason. Do you agree with her assessment that I'm too focused on my career to be a good partner to you? He hesitated, and in that hesitation I had my answer. Sophia, he finally said, you have to admit things have changed. You're always working on your project for graduation. It's temporary. I interrupted. And you've been equally busy with your startup. I never once doubted your commitment because of it. It's not just that, he continued weakly. Your family has helped me see that maybe we want different futures. My family, I repeated flatly. You mean my mother and the sister who's apparently been pursuing you behind my back. No one's been pursuing anyone, Amber protested, though her hand still rested possessively on the couch where Jason had been sitting. I laughed, a hollow sound that startled even me. Mom, why? Why would you do this? For a moment my mother's mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating woman beneath. Let's be practical, Sophia. Amber needs a successful husband more than you do. You'll always be able to support yourself with your computer job. Amber needs security, social standing. The brutal honesty stunned me into silence. Besides, she continued, apparently believing this logic would convince me, you were never going to be the right wife for someone like Jason. He needs someone who understands the social requirements of being married to a successful man. Someone who can entertain, who knows the right people. Someone who puts family first. I think what your mother means, Jason interjected, finding his voice, is that we might want different things in life. No, I think my mother was perfectly clear, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. She decided my sister deserves you more than I do. So she orchestrated this whole scenario, and you went along with it. I turned to leave, then paused. Where's Dad in all this? My mother's expression tightened. Your father doesn't involve himself in these matters, which meant he knew and did nothing again. I looked at Jason one last time. We're done. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't try to explain. Whatever we had is over. As I walked out, I heard my mother saying, she'll calm down eventually. Sophia has always been dramatic about these things. I got in my car and drove until I couldn't see through my tears anymore. Pulling over at a highway rest stop, I called the only person I could trust. Zoe, I need help. Everything's falling apart. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and definitely couldn't focus on my final semester. After 4 years of relentless work, I made the painful decision to withdraw from MIT with just 2 months remaining. My academic advisor was shocked. This isn't like you, Sophia. Whatever is happening, we can work around it. But the thought of remaining in Cambridge, where every coffee shop and library corner held memories of Jason, was unbearable. More importantly, I couldn't bear the thought of graduating with no one in the audience truly cheering for me. The facade had been shattered. Zoe offered me her couch. Her tiny apartment became my refuge as I cycled through grief, rage, and paralyzing self-doubt. Some days I couldn't get out of bed, replaying my mother's words. Amber needs a successful husband more than you do. Had my entire family relationship been a competition I wasn't even aware I was participating in? Your mother is genuinely the most toxic person I've ever heard of, Zoe declared one evening. And I once had a roommate who stole my identity and opened 3 credit cards. Despite her attempts at humor, I could see Zoe's growing concern. After I spent a week barely leaving the couch, she gently suggested therapy. Just a few sessions, she urged. My cousin went after her divorce and said it changed her life. Mostly to appease her, I agreed. Dr. Linden, my therapist, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that cut through my foggy mental state. What your family did was a profound betrayal, she told me in our first session. Your feelings are completely valid, but you have choices now about what role they play in your future. Over the next few months, those weekly sessions became anchors. Dr. Linden helped me see patterns in my family dynamics that went far beyond this final betrayal. More importantly, she helped me understand that I didn't have to continue participating in them. Your mother's behavior suggests deeply rooted insecurities that she's projecting onto both you and your sister, Dr. Linden explained. But her issues don't have to become your issues. By August, I made a decision. I applied to complete my degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, as far from both Boston and California as I could reasonably get. With my MIT transcript and glowing recommendations, I was accepted with a scholarship. Saying goodbye to Zoe was difficult. She had been my rock. You better video call me every week, she said fiercely. And I'm coming to your graduation with an embarrassingly large sign and air horns. Seattle felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. The city's blend of technology and natural beauty suited me perfectly. I found a tiny studio apartment and decorated it with absolutely nothing that reminded me of my past. No family photos, no mementos from MIT, no traces of Jason. My phone remained largely silent. Jason had tried calling and texting for the first few weeks, his messages evolving from defensive, "You didn't give me a chance to explain," to apologetic, "I made a terrible mistake," to pathetically nostalgic, "Remember when we watched the meteor shower on my roof?" I never responded, eventually blocking his number. My parents' communications followed a predictable pattern. My mother acted as if nothing had happened, sending chatty texts about neighborhood gossip. My father sent occasional brief messages, usually devoid of real content. "Hope you're doing well." Neither acknowledged the betrayal directly. I responded minimally to my father, not at all to my mother. Through social media, which I rarely checked anymore, I learned that Jason and Amber were officially dating. 2 months later, they were engaged. The announcement featured a photo of them with my beaming mother between them. My father stood slightly apart, his smile not reaching his eyes. I deactivated all my accounts that day. With my social media gone and my old connections fading, I poured everything into rebuilding my life. I completed my degree with honors, attended by Zoe and her family, but no one from my own. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. The salary was modest, but the role offered valuable experience. Slowly, I built a new friend circle. Kim, who dragged me out for hikes, Aaron and David, a couple who adopted me into their friend group, and Lena from work, whose quiet competence made our long coding sessions enjoyable. These new friends knew nothing of my family drama. To them, I was simply Sophia from the East Coast who didn't talk much about home. They accepted this without question, filling our time together with present joys rather than past sorrows. 1 year after moving to Seattle, I received a text from my father that finally acknowledged reality. "Amber and Jason's wedding this weekend. Your mother asks if you've changed your mind about attending." I hadn't even been invited. I hadn't expected to be. I responded simply, "No." My father's reply came hours later. "I understand. I'm sorry, Sophia." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from any of them. While insufficient, it opened a thin channel of communication between us. We began exchanging occasional texts, nothing deep. He never mentioned my mother or Amber, and I never asked. Through this minimal connection, I learned that Jason's startup had failed 6 months after their wedding. He was now working for a competitor of the company he'd founded. A significant step down from CEO. Amber was between jobs again. They had moved into my parents' guest house temporarily while Jason regrouped. This information should have brought satisfaction, perhaps even joy. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. Their struggles didn't undo my pain or restore what I'd lost. Success, I realized, would be the best revenge, not because it would hurt them but because it would fulfill me. Around this time I was assigned to a new project, developing software for healthcare systems. The project lead was Raj Patel, a brilliant developer. Under his mentorship, my skills expanded exponentially. "You have remarkable talent," he told me during a code review, "but you're playing it safe. Don't be afraid to propose solutions that break conventional approaches." His encouragement pushed me to develop innovative algorithms. When the project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, Raj made sure the entire department knew my contributions had been key. That project led to my first promotion, then to larger responsibilities and leadership roles. By my 3rd year in Seattle, I had established a reputation as someone who solved problems others couldn't. My career was flourishing in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days on Zoe's couch. Yet, despite professional success and a supportive friend circle, I kept potential romantic partners at arm's length. The betrayal had left scars that made trusting difficult. Several promising relationships ended when I couldn't bring myself to be fully vulnerable. The wall I built for protection had become a prison of sorts. Dr. Linden, with whom I still had occasional video sessions, gently pointed this out. Walls keep out pain, she said, but they also keep out joy. At some point, you'll need to decide if the protection is worth the isolation. I wasn't sure it wasn't, but life has a way of making decisions for us when we hesitate too long to make them ourselves. The Nexus project was my company's most ambitious undertaking to date, a comprehensive system to integrate patient data across healthcare providers. The complexity required an elite team. As one of the lead developers, I attended the kickoff meeting with both excitement and trepidation. Before we begin, our department head opened. I'd like to introduce Michael Zhang, who's joining us from our Toronto office. Michael will be the technical architect for Nexus. Michael entered the conference room. My first impression was of quiet competence. Around my age with thoughtful eyes behind simple glasses, and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. When he spoke, explaining his vision, his passion was evident. During the breakout sessions, Michael and I were assigned to map the data flow framework. As we worked, I found myself repeatedly impressed by his methodical, yet creative approach. That's an interesting way to handle the authentication sequence, I commented as he sketched a diagram. I wouldn't have considered decoupling those components. He smiled slightly. Sometimes the best solutions come from questioning assumptions about what belongs together. Something in his tone suggested he might be talking about more than just code. Over the following weeks, we developed a productive professional rhythm. We challenged each other respectfully, building on our different strengths. I found myself looking forward to our working sessions, extending them with questions that could have waited. One evening, as we were the last two people in the office, Michael leaned back and asked, "Want to continue this discussion over dinner? There's a great Vietnamese place around the corner." The invitation was casual, professional, yet I hesitated. This boundary between colleague and potential friend was one I rarely crossed. Noticing my hesitation, he added, "No pressure. I just thought food might help us solve this permissions hierarchy issue." I surprised myself by agreeing. That dinner became the first of many. Our conversations expanded beyond work to books, hiking trails, urban gardening, his passion, and rock climbing mine. Michael spoke of his family with warmth and respect. So different from the dynamics I'd grown up with. I shared carefully edited versions of my own background, mentioning MIT, but not my incomplete final semester, describing Boston but not my family. Michael never pushed for details I wasn't offering. Yet, his attentive listening created a space where I gradually wanted to share more. 3 months into the project, Michael suggested a Saturday hike to celebrate completing a particularly challenging module. The trail he chose offered spectacular views of Mount Rainier. As we reached the summit viewpoint, something shifted. Away from keyboards and conference rooms, surrounded by towering trees and mountain vistas, we were simply two people enjoying each other's company. During our descent, Michael mentioned a documentary film festival. "Would you be interested in going?" "Not as colleagues," he clarified, "but as a date." The word date triggered an immediate internal panic. I'd successfully avoided anything beyond casual coffee since moving to Seattle. The prospect of opening myself to potential hurt again was terrifying. "I need to think about it," I replied honestly. Michael nodded. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands." That evening, I called Zoe for the first time in weeks. "He asked you out and you said you'd think about it?" she exclaimed. "Sophia, this is progress. 6 months ago, you would have invented an imaginary pet emergency to avoid answering. But what if it goes wrong?" I asked. "What if he's not who he seems to be? What if he is exactly who he seems to be?" she countered. "Look, I get it. Jason and your family did a number on you. But from everything you've told me, Michael seems genuinely decent. And you clearly like him enough to be scared of liking him." She was right. After wrestling with my fears for another day, I texted Michael to accept his invitation. Our first official date revealed another layer of Michael. His intelligence I knew, but outside of work, his playful sense of humor emerged. He asked thoughtful questions and remembered small details. Most importantly, he seemed completely comfortable with himself, lacking the insecurity that often drives people to impress others. As weeks became months, our relationship deepened. Michael's patience allowed me to set the pace. When I finally told him I was falling in love with him, 8 months after our first date, his response was both joyful and reassuring. "I've been in love with you since our third project meeting," he admitted. "When you demolished my security protocol design and then immediately built it back up better than before, I knew then you were someone special." Still, I kept my deepest wounds hidden. Michael knew I was estranged from my family, but not why. That changed after a year together when he invited me to Vancouver to meet his parents during Lunar New Year celebrations. The Zhang family welcomed me with genuine warmth. Watching their interactions, the teasing affection, The arguments that resolved with laughter, the unquestioned support, brought both joy and an ache of comparison I couldn't suppress. After we returned to Seattle, Michael found me crying in our hotel room. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Did my family overwhelm you?" "No," I managed through tears. "Your family is wonderful. It's just, they made me see what I never had." That night I finally shared the full story. Jason, my mother's manipulation, my sister's betrayal, my father's complicity, the shattered life I'd fled, and the new one I'd built from the pieces. Michael listened without interruption, his expression shifting from shock to anger to deep compassion. When I finished, he took my hands. "Thank you for trusting me with this. I understand now why trust is so difficult for you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What they did was unforgivable. But I need you to know something. Not everyone will betray you. I won't betray you." "You can't promise that," I whispered. "I can promise to try every day to be worthy of your trust," he replied. "And I can promise that if we ever have conflicts or doubts, I'll bring them directly to you, not to anyone else." His response wasn't a blanket reassurance that my fears were unfounded. Instead, it acknowledged the reality of my experience while offering a different path forward. That honesty meant more than 1,000 promises never to hurt me could have. Our relationship deepened after that night. With my history no longer a shadow between us, I could fully embrace the possibility of a future together. Michael became not just my partner, but my closest friend, challenging me when I needed challenging and supporting me when I needed support. 2 years into our relationship, during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands, Michael proposed. The ring was an emerald, not a diamond, in a design he'd helped create. "It reminded me of your eyes," he explained. "An emerald symbolizes truth and love. Both seem appropriate." Though I'd known this moment might come, I found myself hesitating. "Are you sure? My family baggage is considerable." Michael smiled. "I'm not marrying your family. I'm asking to marry you, Sophia Thompson, with all your brilliance and strength and carefully protected heart. Will you build a life with me?" "Yes," I said, the word carrying all the certainty I'd never thought I'd feel again. "Yes, I will." We planned a small wedding with just our closest friends. I didn't invite my family, though I sent my father a brief text letting him know I was getting married. His response was typical. "Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy." No mention of attending. No questions about Michael. I hadn't expected otherwise. Our wedding day was perfect in its simplicity. Zoe was my maid of honor, flying in from Boston with her new fiancé. We exchanged vows in a garden overlooking Puget Sound, surrounded by 40 people who truly cared about us. "Today I choose you," Michael said in his vows, "and I'll choose you again tomorrow and every day after that." My own vows acknowledged the journey. "You taught me that trust isn't naive. It's the bravest choice we can make. I trust you with my heart, my future, and all the dreams we'll build together." After the wedding, life expanded in unexpected ways. Michael and I combined our technical expertise to launch a healthcare data security startup. The timing was perfect. Increased regulations around patient data privacy created an immediate market. Within 18 months, we'd grown from just the two of us working evenings and weekends to a company of 20 employees with significant venture funding. Success brought visibility I hadn't anticipated. Our company was featured in tech publications and local business journals. I gave interviews about data security, presented at conferences. Though I used my married name professionally, Sophia Jang, it was only a matter of time before my past and present collided. That collision came in the form of a LinkedIn message from Jason. "Congratulations on your success. You always were the brilliant one. We'd love to catch up sometime." I showed the message to Michael, who raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to do?" "Nothing," I replied. "He's not part of my life anymore." I deleted the message without responding, but it triggered thoughts about my family that I'd managed to suppress for years. Through occasional texts with my father, I knew that Jason and Amber's marriage was struggling. His career had never recovered from his startup's failure, and Amber had grown resentful of their financial dependence on my parents. My mother apparently still controlled the family narrative, positioning me as the ungrateful daughter who had abandoned them. Then came news that changed everything. My father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. His text was characteristically understated. "Doctor says 6 to 12 months. Would like to see you before then." After years of maintaining emotional distance, I found myself at a crossroads. The hurt remained, but so did earlier memories of my father teaching me to ride a bike, sneaking me extra dessert, quietly encouraging my academic interests. "I think I need to go," I told Michael. "Then we'll go," he replied simply. Together, the decision to reconnect with my family opened the door to a confrontation years in the making. A confrontation that would finally bring everything full circle in ways I never could have anticipated. After careful consideration, Michael and I decided that rather than visiting my family home, where my mother would control the environment, we would invite them to Seattle. The distance would give me emotional space and the home field advantage I needed for such a loaded reunion. "We'll host them at our place," Michael suggested. That way, you can set the terms of engagement. Our place was a waterfront property on Mercer Island, purchased after our company's second round of funding. The modern glass and cedar home, with its expansive views of Lake Washington, reflected our success in a way that words couldn't convey. And yes, I wasn't above wanting my family to see what I'd built without them. I called my father directly to extend the invitation. His voice, thinner than I remembered, brightened when I suggested the visit. We could come next month, he said. Your mother and I. And would it be all right if Amber and Jason came too? They're living with us now, and your mother doesn't want to leave Amber alone while we're gone. The request sent ice through my veins. Seeing my parents after 6 years would be challenging enough. Facing Jason and Amber seemed impossible. But I recognized the manipulation. My mother ensuring I couldn't have time alone with my father. Everyone is welcome, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. We have plenty of room. Michael squeezed my hand in support as I ended the call. Are you sure about this? Including Jason and Amber? No, I admitted. But I need to do this completely. No more shadows hanging over us. The month before their visit passed quickly. Between preparing our home and managing our growing company, I had little time to dwell on anxiety. Michael arranged for a private chef to handle the first night's dinner, understanding that cooking for the people who had hurt me so deeply would be an unfair burden. The day of their arrival, I stood in our living room, looking out over the water, trying to center myself. Michael came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Remember, he said softly, you're not that vulnerable girl anymore. You're Sophia Zhang, co-founder and CTO of Zhang Secure, with 14 patents and a waitlist of clients. More importantly, you're a woman who rebuilt her life from scratch. Nothing they say or do can take that away. The doorbell rang precisely at 4 o'clock. My mother had always valued punctuality. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My father stood closest, dramatically thinner than I remembered, his skin bearing the yellowish tint characteristic of his disease. Despite his obvious illness, his eyes lit up at the sight of me. Sophia, he said, his voice catching. Without thinking, I stepped forward to embrace him, his body feeling fragile beneath my arms. My mother stood just behind him, barely aged. Her critical eyes took me in, then shifted to assess our home, visible through the open door. You look well, she said, her tone suggesting surprise at this fact. Thank you for having us. Amber and Jason hung back awkwardly. My sister had gained weight, her once model-esque figure now softer. Her carefully maintained blonde hair showed dark roots. Beside her, Jason looked almost exactly as I remembered, though a new tension lined his face and his once confident posture had diminished. Please come in, I said, stepping back to allow them entry. Michael is looking forward to meeting you all. As they entered our home, I watched their expressions. My mother's practiced neutrality couldn't fully mask her shock at the obvious luxury. Amber's eyes widened, darting from the vaulted ceilings to the designer furniture to the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the lake view. Jason seemed to physically shrink as he took in the success I'd achieved without him. Michael appeared from his office, the consummate host. Tall, distinguished in casual linen pants and a light blue button-down. He radiated confidence without arrogance. Welcome to Seattle, he greeted them, shaking hands with my father, then my mother. When he reached Jason, there was a brief, charged moment as the two men assessed each other. Michael's smile never wavered, but I saw Jason recognize something in my husband's eyes. Knowledge of exactly who Jason was and what he had done. We've prepared the guest rooms upstairs, Michael continued smoothly. Why don't you all get settled before dinner? Sophia can show you the way. As I led my family upstairs, my mother fell into step beside me. This is quite a home, she remarked. Your husband must be very successful. We both are, mother, I replied evenly. I co-founded our company with Michael. We're equal partners in every sense. She absorbed this with a tight smile. How progressive. I showed them to their rooms. My parents in the main guest suite, Amber and Jason in the smaller room across the hall. As they unpacked, I retreated downstairs to find Michael opening wine in the kitchen. They're exactly as you described, he said quietly. Your mother started assessing the property value within 30 seconds of arrival. I laughed despite my tension. Just wait until dinner. She'll be counting the silver. The private chef Michael had arranged prepared an exquisite meal. As we gathered around our dining table, the conversation remained superficial. Seattle weather, their flight, my father's treatment options. Michael expertly filled awkward silences with questions about Boston and observations about healthcare systems. It was during dessert that my mother finally broached the subject of our company. So, she said, setting down her fork with precision, Sophia mentioned you run a business together. What exactly do you do? Michael glanced at me, silently offering the chance to answer. I took it. We founded Zhang Secure 4 years ago, I explained. We specialize in healthcare data security systems. Our software protects patient information while allowing authorized access across different healthcare providers. Zhang Secure, my mother repeated. You took Michael's name for the company? It tested better with focus groups, I replied smoothly, though the real reason was simpler. I'd wanted nothing of my past associated with my future. They're being modest, my father interjected. I looked up their company before we came. They were featured in Forbes last year. Healthcare Security Revolution, the article called it. My mother's eyebrows rose fractionally. How impressive. Jason cleared his throat. What's your market valuation now? Last funding round, Michael answered casually. Our valuation was just over $300 million. We're not looking for additional investment currently. We're cash flow positive and growing sustainably. The figure hung in the air, $300 million. Jason's failed startup had peaked at a $4 million valuation before collapsing. $300 million, Amber repeated, looking at Jason with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's, wow. Enough about business, my mother interjected briskly. Sophia, will you and Michael be starting a family soon? You're not getting any younger. Mom, Amber protested weakly. It's a reasonable question, my mother defended. They have this enormous house. Seems a shame not to fill it with children. We're focused on our company right now, Michael answered diplomatically. But we haven't ruled out children in the future. My mother turned to me. You always said you wanted children, Sophia. Remember those dolls you used to line up in your room? You had names for all of them. I had no such memory. Amber had been the one obsessed with dolls. This subtle rewriting of history was so typical of my mother that I almost laughed. If Sophia and I decide to have children, Michael said, his voice gentle but firm, it will be on our timeline, not anyone else's. My mother's smile tightened. She wasn't used to being challenged so politely yet definitively. As the evening progressed, the dynamics became increasingly clear. My mother attempted to reassert control through passive-aggressive comments and selective memories. My father observed quietly, occasionally catching my eye with what seemed like apology. Amber fluctuated between feigned interest in our lives and thinly veiled envy. And Jason grew progressively more uncomfortable, drinking too much wine and barely contributing. By the time we moved to the living room for after-dinner drinks, the facade of a pleasant family reunion had worn dangerously thin. How are things in Boston? I asked, deliberately vague. A weighted silence followed. My father stared into his whiskey. My mother smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. We're between opportunities at the moment, Amber finally answered. Jason's exploring several promising positions. I see, I replied. And you're living with mom and dad while you explore? Temporarily, Jason said quickly. My non-compete clause from Growth Tech just expired, so I can finally look at other startups in the same space. It's been 3 years, Amber added, an edge to her voice. A very long temporary arrangement. We're happy to help family through difficult transitions, my mother said pointedly. That's what families do. They support each other through challenges. The implication hung heavily in the air that I had abandoned my family responsibilities by cutting contact. Michael, sensing the rising tension, stood. Would anyone like to see the garden? We've just installed a Japanese-inspired meditation area overlooking the water. My father rose eagerly. I'd enjoy that. As the others followed Michael outside, I remained behind to refresh drinks. Jason lingered, awkwardly handling his empty glass. Your husband seems like a good man, he said finally. He is, I replied simply. You've done incredibly well for yourself, Sophia. I always knew you would. I looked at him directly for the first time that evening. Did you? Because I recall you agreeing that I was too focused on my career to be a good partner, that I'd never understand the social aspects of business. He flushed. I was confused. Your mother can be very persuasive. Yes, she can be. But we all make our own choices, Jason. He set down his glass. I made the wrong one. Surely you know that by now. Before I could respond, my father appeared in the doorway. Sophia, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Jason nodded awkwardly and slipped past my father toward the garden. My father took a seat on the couch, his movement slow and deliberate. Your home is beautiful, he said. But more importantly, you seem happy. I am, I confirmed. I owe you an apology, he continued, his voice slow. Many apologies, actually. I failed you, Sophia. I knew what your mother and Amber were doing with Jason, and I did nothing to stop it. The directness of his admission startled me. Why not? He sighed heavily. Cowardice, mainly. I've spent 40 years taking the path of least resistance with your mother. It was easier to let her have her way than to fight battles I didn't think I could win. He looked up, his eyes damp. But that's no excuse for letting her hurt you. For hurting you myself through inaction. His sincere regret pierced the armor I built around my heart. I needed you to stand up for me, Dad. I know, he said. And I'll regret it until my dying day that I didn't. He reached for my hand. I don't expect forgiveness, Sophia. I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now what happened, and I'm deeply sorry for my part in it. From the garden, raised voices drew our attention. Through the windows, I could see my mother and Amber in what appeared to be a heated discussion, with Michael standing calmly between them. We should join them, my father suggested. Your mother becomes unpredictable when challenged. In the garden, the scene became clear as we approached. My mother was berating Michael about something while Amber stood nearby, arms crossed defensively. Absolutely inappropriate to suggest such a thing, my mother was saying. Our financial arrangements are private family matters. Michael noticed our approach and turned. Ah, Sophia Gerald, we were just discussing family dynamics. He's suggesting we're taking advantage of Dad's finances. Amber blurted as if we were some kind of parasites. Michael shook his head. That's not what I said. I simply observed that multi-generational living can create complex financial interdependencies that sometimes prevent people from making fully independent choices. My mother's face flushed with anger. You know nothing about our family. On the contrary, Michael replied calmly. I know a great deal about your family from Sophia's perspective. I know about the manipulation, the favoritism, the betrayal. Michael, I warned softly, though part of me thrilled to hear someone finally confront my mother directly. Betrayal is a strong word, my mother sniffed. Family matters are complicated. Sophia has always had a flair for drama and a selective memory. Mom, Amber interrupted, surprising everyone. Stop. Just stop. My mother turned to her in shock. Excuse me. He's right, Amber continued, her voice shaking. We both know what you did with Jason. What we did. It was wrong. Jason, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. Your mother told me Sophia was seeing someone else at MIT, that she was using me as a backup plan while pursuing a professor she was interested in. I gasped. That's completely untrue. I know that now, he said quietly. But at the time it made sense of why you were so busy, why you seemed distant. Your mother showed me texts from your phone that seemed to confirm it. I never texted anything like that, I said, my mind racing. She must have used your phone, Amber finished. She had me text things from your old number that she kept in her contacts. Made it look like they were coming from you. My mother's face hardened. This is absurd. I was simply helping two people who are clearly better suited find their way to each other. By lying, my father asked, his voice stronger than I'd heard it all weekend. By manipulating a young man's feelings and betraying our daughter? I did what was necessary, my mother insisted. Amber needed stability that Sophia didn't. Sophia was always going to be fine on her own. So, you decided to sacrifice my happiness for Amber's? I asked, the hurt still fresh despite the years. I made a practical decision, my mother replied unapologetically. Amber's looks were her only real asset. She needed to capitalize on them before they faded. You had your education, your career potential. Mom, Amber exclaimed, clearly wounded. Is that really how you see me? As nothing but a pretty face with an expiration date. My mother waved dismissively. Don't be so sensitive. I'm simply being practical. I did what any mother would do. Ensured both my daughters' futures as best I could. No, my father countered, surprising us all with his firmness. You did what served your vision of how things should be. You didn't consider what either of your daughters actually wanted or needed. The garden fell silent. My mother's face registered shock at my father's rebellion. Amber looked torn between vindication and devastation at our mother's assessment of her worth. Jason stared at the ground, the full extent of his manipulation finally clear. Michael moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine in silent support. I think, I said finally, that we've all had enough truth for one evening. Let's continue this conversation tomorrow after everyone's had some rest. As we headed inside, Jason caught my arm gently. Sophia, I need you to know how sorry I am. I should have trusted what we had. I should have talked to you directly. I looked at the man I had once loved so deeply, now a diminished figure trapped in a marriage built on lies. Yes, you should have. Later that night, as Michael and I prepared for bed, he asked, Are you okay? That was intense. I considered the question carefully. I think I am. For years I've carried this wound, never fully understanding how deep the deception went. Now I know, and strangely that helps. Your sister surprised me, he observed. I didn't expect her to break ranks with your mother. Me neither, I admitted. Maybe there's hope for her yet. Michael pulled me close. What happens now with your family? I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I don't know exactly, but for the first time I think there might be a path forward, at least with my father, and maybe eventually with Amber. My mother? That's more complicated. Whatever you decide, Michael said, kissing my forehead. I'm with you every step of the way. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized that the confrontation had shifted something fundamental within me. The people who had once held such power over my happiness now seemed smaller, less significant. They hadn't determined my fate after all. I had. The morning after our confrontation brought a strange calm to the house. My father joined me for early coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise paint the lake in gold and pink. We sat in comfortable silence for a while before he spoke. I had a long talk with your mother last night, he said, his thin hands cradling his mug. One of many we should have had years ago. I told her things need to change if she wants any relationship with you going forward. And how did that go? I asked, already knowing the answer. He smiled ruefully. About as well as you'd expect. She's not used to ultimatums, especially from me. What about you, Dad? What do you want? He looked out over the water, considering. I want whatever time I have left, to be honest. No more pretending. No more enabling behavior that hurts the people I love. He turned to me. And I want to know my daughter again if she's willing. Over the next 3 days, our family dynamics shifted in ways I never anticipated. My father and I spent hours talking, filling in the gaps of our lost years. I showed him our company offices, introduced him to colleagues, shared the work that filled me with purpose. He listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that reminded me of the thoughtful man who had encouraged my early curiosity about computers. I'm proud of you, Sophia, he told me as we walked along the waterfront. Not because of your success, though that's remarkable. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Strong, compassionate, resilient. You created this life despite us, not because of us. His cancer made our reconciliation bittersweet. A relationship rebuilt with an expiration date looming. Yet, there was grace in having this time, in clearing away the debris of the past before saying goodbye. With Amber, healing came more tentatively. The morning after the confrontation, she asked if I would walk with her around the neighborhood. I don't even know where to start, she said as we strolled past waterfront mansions. Sorry seems inadequate. Why did you do it? I asked. The question had haunted me for years. She was quiet for a long moment. At first, it was just flattering to have someone like Jason interested in me. Mom kept saying what a good match we'd be. How much more I deserved someone successful than you did. She glanced at me. I know how awful that sounds now. And later, when you knew how much it hurt me, by then I was trapped in Mom's narrative. If what we'd done wasn't justified, then I was just terrible. It was easier to believe you'd be fine, that you didn't need Jason like I did. She stopped walking. The truth is, I was weak. I let Mom make my decisions because taking responsibility for my own life was scary. Her honesty surprised me. When did that change? Watching you yesterday, she said. Successful, confident, genuinely happy with Michael. It made me see what taking control of your own life actually looks like. She sighed. I'm 35, living in our parents' guest house, in a failing marriage with no career or purpose. Mom still buys my clothes and tells me how to wear my hair. I felt an unexpected pang of empathy. While my mother had betrayed me, she had infantilized Amber, keeping her dependent and diminished. It's not too late to change that, I said carefully. How? The desperation in her voice was palpable. I considered my response. Start with something small but meaningful. Get a job. Any job that's yours alone. Open a bank account in only your name. Build from there. Over the following days we had several similar conversations. I didn't offer forgiveness. That would take time. But I did offer perspective and practical advice. To my surprise, Amber listened. My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated. After the confrontation, she retreated into cool politeness, maintaining the fiction that she had acted in everyone's best interests. On their final evening with us, however, as Michael and my father discussed baseball and Amber helped our housekeeper, my mother found me alone on the deck. You've done well for yourself, she said, an admission that clearly cost her. Better than I expected. Thank you, I replied, not taking the bait of her qualified praise. I still believe I did what was necessary at the time, she continued. But I recognized that my methods were perhaps overly controlling. Coming from my mother, this was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to receive. I won't pretend what you did didn't hurt me deeply, I said. But I've built a good life. A life that makes me happy. She nodded, looking out at the water rather than at me. Your father wants us to seek counseling. Family therapy, he calls it. I couldn't hide my surprise. And you agreed? It's important to him. She smoothed her slacks, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. Would you consider joining us occasionally? Not regularly, of course. I know you're busy. The request, halting and uncomfortable, revealed a vulnerability I'd never seen in her before. I'll think about it, I promised. Not ready to commit, but unwilling to refuse outright. She accepted this with a nod, and we stood in silence watching the sunset. Two women with a broken past and an uncertain future, but perhaps a sliver of possibility between us. The most surprising conversation came from Jason, who asked to speak with me privately before their departure. Michael raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the request. Are you comfortable with that? He asked. Yes, I assured him. There's nothing he could say that would affect us. Jason and I sat in the garden, the space between us filled with history and regret. I wanted to thank you, he began, which was not what I expected. For what? For not hating me, he said simply. You would be justified. I considered this. Hate requires energy. I'd rather direct it elsewhere. Besides, I've come to understand how thoroughly you were manipulated. That doesn't excuse my choices, he said, showing more self-awareness than I remembered. I betrayed your trust. I let myself be convinced that what we had wasn't real or valuable. He hesitated. Seeing you with Michael, the way he looks at you, the respect between you. It's made me realize what I gave up. I tensed, worried this was heading toward an inappropriate confession. He noticed and quickly added, I'm not saying this to disrupt your life or suggest anything inappropriate. I want you to know that I recognize what I lost, the person I hurt. My biggest regret isn't the failed startup or the career setbacks. It's that I let someone else define what should have mattered most to me. His sincerity seemed genuine. His regret palpable. What will you do now? I asked. He sighed. Start over, I think. Amber and I have been pretending for years. Neither of us is happy. I'm sorry to hear that, I said and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish them misery. Don't be, he said. It's time for both of us to face reality and make better choices. He stood to leave, then paused. You deserved better, Sophia. I'm glad you found it. After they left, our house felt simultaneously emptier and lighter. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, clearing away festering wounds and replacing them with clear-eyed understanding. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose how it affected my future. In the months that followed, we established new patterns of connection. My father and I spoke weekly by phone and video chat as his condition deteriorated. I flew to Boston twice to spend time with him. Difficult visits that nevertheless brought peace to both of us. When he passed away 8 months after our reunion, I stood beside my mother and sister at his funeral, united in grief if not in full reconciliation. After my father's death, Amber surprised everyone by following through on her promises to change. She filed for divorce from Jason, moved into her own apartment, and found work as an administrative assistant at a community college. The position was modest, but represented an independence she'd never known. We maintained cautious but increasingly warm contact, rebuilding a relationship that had been poisoned since childhood. My mother remained my mother, critical, controlling, resistant to change. But our confrontation had shifted the power dynamic permanently. She could no longer rewrite history or manipulate me. I engaged with her on my terms or not at all. It wasn't a warm relationship, but it was an honest one. With my family receding to their appropriate place in my life, rather than dominating it, Michael and I focused on our future. Our company continued to thrive, expanding internationally and developing new security protocols that became industry standards. 2 years after the family confrontation, we welcomed our daughter Lily, followed 18 months later by our son James. Becoming parents ourselves cast my family history into sharper relief. As I held my children, I made silent promises never to play favorites, to see and celebrate them for exactly who they were, to let them chart their own courses with support rather than control. Watching Michael with our children, patient, attentive, delighting in their uniqueness, I often reflected on how completely my life had transformed from what it might have been. Had my mother not orchestrated that betrayal, had Jason and I married as once planned, would I have found this level of fulfillment? The painful truth was that their betrayal, while devastating, had ultimately freed me to build something far better than I might have otherwise. This wasn't about forgiving the unforgivable or finding silver linings in trauma. It was about recognizing that our worst moments don't define us unless we let them. That sometimes the path forward requires leaving behind not just people who hurt us, but also dreams and expectations that no longer serve us. The ultimate victory wasn't financial success or professional recognition, though those were gratifying. It wasn't even the beautiful family Michael and I created, precious as they were. The victory was internal. The knowledge that I had rebuilt myself from broken pieces into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. On my daughter's 3rd birthday, as our home filled with friends and laughter, I caught sight of myself in a window reflection. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the devastated girl who had once fled her family's betrayal. This woman stood tall, confident in her worth, surrounded by love she had chosen, and that had chosen her in return. I often think about the question of forgiveness. Have I forgiven my mother, my sister, Jason? Not entirely. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. But I've released the anger that once threatened to define me. I've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And I've found peace in allowing those who hurt me to occupy an appropriate space in my heart and history. Acknowledged but no longer central. The journey from betrayal to this peaceful place wasn't linear or simple. It required confronting painful truths, setting boundaries, and most importantly, believing I deserved better. Perhaps that's the most valuable lesson of all. That our capacity for happiness expands when we truly believe we're worthy of it. So if you're facing betrayal or heartbreak right now, remember this. The people who hurt you don't get to decide your worth. They don't get to write the ending to your story. That power belongs to you alone. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest blows, redirecting us toward paths we might never have chosen, but that lead to places far better than we imagined. What painful experience has ultimately led you to something better? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and hit that notification bell to catch my next video. Remember, every ending is just the beginning of something new. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care.